Good evening, friends, and shalom. Welcome to this episode of the Watchdog. Although technically, this one is not a standard episode, but a special report, as I'm calling it. In other words, we're not going to be talking about the news per se, but we are going to be talking about something that is very relevant to it. At any rate, thank you for joining us here tonight on the Watchdog. I am your host, CJ Cox. And of course, we are here to tell you that we are living in biblical times. Uh, Today is October the 18th, 2023. And we have a very interesting program for you tonight. For those who are watching live and after the fact, thank you very much for being here. If you are here, please remember to like and share this video. Please consider subscribing to this channel if you have not done so. Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. Excuse me. Remember that you can leave any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, critiques, or anything of that nature, either in the comment section down below or in the live chat. If you are watching this live, drop the tag at the synagogue or the synagogue news rather, and I will try to answer any questions I can at the end of the program. By the way, I don't know if anybody ever is hesitant to ask questions, but at the moment, since we're still a relatively small program, there's almost a 100% chance I can get to them. In fact, the only time that I've had even a tag so far in the last couple episodes we've done was just somebody informing me that there was stuff happening live in Israel. But in case anybody's worried about anything like that, just know that there's pretty much a 100% chance I get to your questions because there's just not very many comments to go through. Remember, you can follow this program on various social media websites. I am on Gab, Parler. Excuse me, I got to stop saying Parler. Parler doesn't exist anymore. I am on Gab, Twitter, Facebook, Minds, Truth Social, at the Synagogue. You can follow me on any of those different platforms if you fancy. If you do fancy, please consider sharing this video to those platforms, as well as any other platforms that you may frequent. Also, please remember to get a Rumble account and follow us over there. Sometimes the content that we post here does not actually continue to be on this platform. And of course, that leaves open the possibility that this entire channel could be taken off of this platform. So in order to get around that, we have a backup account on Rumble. You can find me there at the Synagogue, and all of these episodes are posted there after the fact. In fact, I believe I have Rumble linked to this account. So it actually updates automatically after some time, of course, but nevertheless, updates automatically, which is very cool. So please do remember to follow us there. I think that is incredibly important considering, again, this website is not particularly, how would you say this, kind to the content that we are making here today. So certainly appreciate anybody who is checking that out. Also, if anybody wants to support the work that we are doing here, you can do so by giving to the Patreon. It is $5 monthly if you decide to give. You can give as much or as little as you like, but the only tier I have is $5 monthly. And if you do decide to give to that tier, you will have the benefit of having access to my Blogladite articles. Blogladite has, as long as this show was on a hiatus, Blogladite itself was also on a hiatus. But of course, that means since we're no longer on said hiatus, that is not anymore either. The episode that, or excuse me, the article that will be coming up this Saturday, is a article discussing Mia Khalifa and how she's basically bamboozled the entire anti-porn industry, or movement rather, to think that she is some darling child and victimized by the pornography industry, when in reality she is a victimizer and manipulator who is interested in nothing more than making a couple of bucks off of her name, which by the way isn't even her real name, but you'll have to tune into the article for that. So please do consider subscribing there, if for no other reason than you get access to more content in my Blogladite articles. Again, $5 monthly. We post bi-weekly on Saturdays, and hope that is intriguing to you guys as well. Also, because there's just so much content, there is stuff that you're not going to see on this channel that you will see in my Blogletites, right? So just consider subscribing there if you do appreciate this content and if you'd like to support what we do and get yourself a little bit extra content on top of that. Lord willing, we will have another episode of the Watchdog tomorrow. Obviously, that's going to be a standard episode, just going through the news. I'm debating whether or not I want to do another special report on Friday, or if I want to just do what I usually do on Friday, which is my Sabbath night open mics over on the other channel. But nevertheless, some of you guys don't even know that I have another channel, although I know for the most part, fans of either channel tend to be going back and forth. But we might be live on Friday also. And I think that's pretty much it for the announcements. I will do another this day in history because I very much like doing that. That's one of my favorite parts of doing these watchdogs. So again, today is October the 18th, and this day in history was the day when the mother of Nero, that is the Emperor Nero, killed herself by self-inflicted starvation, which is very interesting, I think, because of the fact that it had so massive of an impact. That whole era had such a massive impact on, on the rest of the world. Nero, of course, is remembered as being one of the most evil dictators of all time. I mean, the Roman emperors by themselves are known for being diabolically evil. And yet there's a couple names which are even diabolical for the Romans, right? Elagabalus, Caligula, and of course, the most popular, Nero. In fact, it's widely believed that the Antichrist figure in the Bible is in some ways modeled after Nero. And in fact, there are some, particularly preterists, who even believe that he is the Antichrist figure. That's not my own conviction, but nevertheless, you can clearly see allusions to him in the Antichrist literature that you find in the Bible. And I speak here particularly about Thessalonians and Revelation. Well, his mother basically did her damnedest to make sure that he got the position of emperor that he ended up having. And when he eventually was killed, which, by the way, his last words were, at least allegedly, "The world loses an artist," which is just so unbelievably egotistical, and it fits perfectly if you know anything about Nero. But she had done her damnedest to make sure that he actually got to the position of emperor. And once he eventually died, or was murdered, more accurately, along with another son of hers whose name was Drusus, she felt that she no longer had any reason to live. I personally don't think that has anything to do with her own guilt. I think it probably has much to do with the fact that she lost out on her bid to power. Obviously, being the mother of the emperor is a very powerful position. But nevertheless, so yeah, she died by suicide today, which is not something that you typically think of as being impactful, but it is indeed impactful. It also happens to be, just for the record, the very first event that took place on this day that we know of. What I mean by that is, obviously numerous events took place on this day, but in the historical record, the earliest record of an event happening on this day was, in fact, the suicide of the mother of Nero. But at any rate, and in case anybody was curious, I guess I should probably say her name was Vespania. Sometimes she's also known as Agrippina, but Vespania is the name that I typically know her by. Anyways, so we have a very interesting program for you guys today. I hope those things are interesting for somebody besides me. I like giving these studies and histories, but I don't know, maybe nobody else cares. Anyways, I'm getting off on a tangent. We have an interesting program for you guys today. Like I said, it's going to be a special report. We're going to be going through the entire Hamas covenant, more popularly known as the Hamas Charter. So we don't have any news for you guys today. Rather, we're going to be going through what Hamas believes according to their own foundational document, where they get these beliefs from. Cough, cough. It's definitely the holy texts of the so-called religion of peace. And we're going to go through some clips of Hamas leadership actually saying this blatantly, although, of course, they're going to say it blatantly in the text we're going to be looking over as well. So I hope this is interesting for you guys. I hope you learned something. I hope you know a little bit more today than you did 5 minutes ago or yesterday or whatever point you're listening to this. You know, but anyways, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into this. And I think this will be a doozy of an episode, but it will indeed be worth it, in my opinion. So this is from avalon.law.yale.edu, which is the Avalon Law Group website. It is obviously, as you could see by the Yale thing there, a part of the Yale Library. That is Yale University, as in the Ivy League. And I will drop a link to this in the comment section now so that anybody who's interested in reading it on their own time may do so. I hope you guys are able to see what I have on my screen. Let's go ahead and just jump right into this. So this was written in 1988, as you can see here. It is called the Hamas Covenant. We typically call it their charter. You know, you can also think of it as their constitution, but nevertheless, full name is the Covenant of the Islamic Resistance Movement, which, by the way, if you were not aware, Hamas, the word Hamas is actually an acronym for the Islamic Resistance Movement. Now, of course, you have to remember, Hamas is an Arabic group. So if you're thinking Islamic Resistance Movement, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. That doesn't sound like it makes the letters to Hamas at all. Well, yeah, because it's actually spoken in Arabic, right? It's not spoken in English. The name in Arabic, which I am certainly going to butcher, is Harakah al-Mukawama al-Islayama, right? So let me say that again. Harakah al-Mukawama al-Islayama, right? And that translates to the Islamic Resistance Movement, or HA, Harakah Mukawama, excuse me. So there you have your M. And then al-Islama, there you have your AS sound, right? I'm not 100% sure how it ends up being Hamas and not like Hamis or something like that, but I don't speak Arabic, so you know that there you have that. But nevertheless, it translates in English as Islamic Resistance Movement, and Hamas is an acronym for that name. Okay, so this is the Covenant of the Islamic Resistance Movement. It was written, as you can see here, August 18th, 1988, and it has since not been changed. It starts off with these words: in the name of the most merciful Allah. So you need to understand, and you can already see this by the name, Islamic Resistance Movement, and even the phraseology they're using, the covenant, right, of the Islamic Resistance Movement. But if it wasn't already painfully obvious, it should be by this starting phrase: in the name of the most merciful Allah. Hamas is a Islamist group, right? It is not simply a pro-Palestinian group, like, for example, the Palestinian Liberation Organization is, although they are also a terrorist group and definitely have their own problems. But nevertheless, Hamas is a Islamic terror group. They are jihadists, right? They want to establish a caliphate in what we today call Israel, of course, which they would like to call Palestine. And they want to spread Islam from that caliphate into all the different regions of the world. It is the same as the Taliban. It is the same as ISIS. It is the same as Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Nusra Front, so on and so forth. These are all birds of a feather. You can see this by the very first words of the Hamas covenant: in the name of the most merciful Allah. All right. Now, actually reading beyond this: ye are the best nation that ye are the best nation that hath been raised up unto mankind. Ye command that which is just, and ye forbid that which is unjust, and ye believe in Allah. And if they who have received the scriptures had believed, by the way, they who had received the scriptures here, if you're not familiar with Islamic terminology, that is a reference to Jews and Christians. Another thing you need to understand about Islam in general is that Islam claims in its own holy texts to be a continuation of the revelation that was given to the Jews at Mount Sinai and through the prophets, and the revelation that was given to Jesus and his apostles. Islam does not deny the veracity of these prophets or Jesus Christ. Rather, it denies specific claims about these prophets and Jesus Christ. Okay? So Jesus, for example, who they call Isa, which, fun fact, is not actually the proper Arabic translation or transliteration, rather, of Yeshua, which is Jesus's Hebrew name, but I digress. They do believe that Isa, their version of Jesus, is in fact the Messiah, and that he was a real prophet, and that he actually gave a real message, which they even refer to as the Injil, that being the Arabic word for gospel. Actually, more accurately, the Arabic word for evangelion, which is the original Greek word that we today have transliterated into gospel. So when they say, and if they who had received the scriptures had believed, what they're referring to is those who received the message of Moses and the prophets after him, and Jesus and the apostles after him. Islam accepts the veracity of those prophets, but they have a wildly different interpretation of them. And in fact, if you're familiar with fiction, you could say that Islam has, in a very real sense, retconned. That is to say that they've gone back and changed the details. They have retconned the original stories. So it's not quite as simple as, Christianity has an Old Testament, just like the Jews do, although they, of course, would call it Tanakh. It's not an Old Testament for them because they don't have a new one. But I digress. It's not quite as simple as Christianity having the Tanakh as part of its scriptures. Islam does seriously change the narrative and Islamify it, for lack of a better term. But nevertheless, it does at least claim to accept the veracity of these prophets. That is not important because I'm trying to say there's any sort of equivalence between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. It is only important so we understand this phrase. They who have received the scriptures. They're also going to be calling us people of the book, right? That is a reference to Christians and Jews. Keep that in mind as we continue to go through this study. And if they who have received the scriptures had believed, it had surely been the better for them. There are believers among them, but the greater part of them are transgressors. So what they're saying here is that Christians and Jews are transgressors. There are true believers amongst the Christians and true believers amongst the Jews, but for the most part, they are transgressors. Okay. Remember, we're not even into the articles yet. This is the very first portion of the Covenant of the Islamic Resistance Movement, or Hamas Charter. Back to it. They shall not hurt you unless with a slight hurt. And if they fight against you, they shall turn their backs to you, and they shall not be helped. They are smitten with vileness wheresoever they are found, unless they obtain security by entering into a treaty with Allah and a treaty with men. And they draw on themselves indignation from Allah, and they are afflicted with poverty. This they suffer because they disbelieved the signs of Allah and slew the prophets unjustly, this because they were rebellious and transgressed. You can see here that the covenant is, at least this Yale version of it, is citing its sources, and we'll get to that here in nary a moment. But right now, what I would like to do is draw attention to the fact that this is a religious document. Okay, you cannot understand Hamas or the current conflict between Hamas and Israel until you understand this fact. This is a religious document that is steeped neck deep in the teachings of Islam. Okay, that is a unavoidable fact about this particular document. Now, what we just read, you see there it says Al Imran, verses 109 to 111. This is part of the Quran. What we just read is part of the Quran, specifically surahs. I can't remember the name of the surah here. I believe it would be, well, the name is Al Imran, but I believe it would be chapter 3, if I remember correctly. Well, it doesn't matter because I have a page open and I'm going to show you it here in just a moment. But nevertheless, What we are reading right now, what we just read, is not something that comes from the charter itself. It is something which comes directly from the Quran. And by the way, I'd just like to take this as a moment to point out, when people constantly say things like, oh, this is a misinterpretation. Listen, friends, if I was a Muslim, I would for sure be a member of a group like ISIS. Okay. And what I'm trying to say there is not to say that I think these guys are justified. What I'm trying to say is they are simply taking their holy text at their word. And in a way, you can even say there's something commendable about that. Now, their holy texts happen to be completely abhorrent, but nevertheless, that is what they are doing. That is what they're doing, right? They are simply taking their holy texts at their word. Okay. Continuing forward, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. This is a quote from The Martyr by Imam Hassan al-Banna, and it, of course, adds here of blessed memory because they consider him to be a blessed figure. I want to read that one more time. Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. So when people say, how about a two-state solution? Why can't there be peace between the Arabs and between the Jews? Well, the Quran, the Hamas charter expressly, forbids it. And the Hamas charter is not making this up. This comes from a well-known Muslim imam, Hassan al-Banna. All right. Last quotation here before we get into the next section. The Islamic world is on fire. Each of us should pour some water, no matter how little, to extinguish whatever one can without waiting for the others. This is a quotation from Sheikh Amjad al-Zahawi. Again, it says of blessed memory. Again, we see in the name of the most merciful Allah. This is now the introduction. Technically, what we just read is a preamble. In the introduction, it says, praise be unto Allah, to whom we resort for help and whose forgiveness, guidance, and support we seek. Allah bless the Prophet and grant him salvation, his companions and supporters, and to those who carried out his message and adopted his laws, everlasting prayers and salvation as long as the earth and heaven will last hereafter. O people, out of the midst of troubles and the sea of suffering, out of the palpitations of faithful hearts and cleansed arms, out of the sense of duty and in response to Allah's command, the call has gone out, rallying people together and making them follow the ways of Allah, leading them to have determined will in order to fulfill their role in life, to overcome all obstacles and surmount the difficulties on the way. Constant preparation has continued, and so has the readiness to sacrifice life and all that is precious for the sake of Allah. So this right here, I would like to point out, is a key element of the rest of the charter. The Hamas soldiers, if you choose to call them that, terrorists is really more accurate, fully expect and expressly state in their charter their willingness to die for this cause. I'm sure you guys could sympathize with that, in so much as you could see why, if somebody truly believed this, why they might be willing to sacrifice all for this movement, even if you don't sympathize with them in any way beyond that, which, to be fair, that's the only way you should sympathize with this statement, because the Quran is full of crap. Not that I'm biased or anything. Thus it was the nucleus of the movement the nucleus of the movement was formed and started to pave its way through the tempestuous seas of hope, or sea of hopes, rather. I completely messed that up. Let me restart. Thus it was that the nucleus of the movement was formed and started to pave its way through the tempestuous sea of hopes and expectations, of wishes and yearnings, of troubles and obstacles, of pain and challenges, both inside and outside. When the idea was ripe, the seed grew, and the plant struck root in the soil of reality, away from passing emotions and hateful haste. Which is a very ironic sentiment to hear from them. The Islamic resistance movement emerged to carry out its role through striving for the sake of its creator, its arms intertwined with those of all fighters for the liberation of Palestine. The spirits of its fighters meet with the spirits of all fighters who have sacrificed their lives on the soil of Palestine ever since it was conquered by the companions of the Prophet. Allah bless him and grant him salvation until this day. It is interesting that Hamas's own document admits that this land is not originally Arab land, but rather is conquered land. The thing is, Islam doesn't care about that fact. Here in the West, we, for some reason, think that that's an important fact. Islam, like normal people, doesn't actually care about that fact. And what I mean by that is, if we were to say, California is conquered land. Well, if you live in California, you'd say, well, fantastic, I live here. It's my home now, right? I believe I have claim to this, whether that's claim because it's under the banner of the United States of America, or whether you lived back in the day and believed in manifest destiny, or whether you are just simply attached to your home. Nevertheless, the fact that it's conquered doesn't matter to you, right? Now, here in the West, of course, we decide we need to make that distinction as it pertains to Israel and Gaza, and even sometimes as it pertains to here, at least in the media. But nevertheless, when we're talking about Israel, Gaza, we'll say, oh, well, Israel, they're conquerors, they're colonizers, right? Which, of course, is flatly untrue unless you go all the way back to the conquest of the Canaanites. But show me where the Canaanites are, at any rate. But Hamas actually is not fooled by this. Hamas is not interested in claiming that this land is originally theirs. They don't care whether or not it's originally theirs. They know they conquered it, and it doesn't matter even a lick because they want it. They want it back, right? Which I just find very interesting. It flies right in the face of this leftist idea that we have, where we think to ourselves, these, whoever is not the conquering group basically should win out. And Islam freely admits that they are the conquering group. They freely admit that they are the colonizers. So they'll call Jews colonizers when it suits their narrative, but they know that they're colonizers, and you just saw it in their own charter. I'll read it again. Ever since, we'll start here, the spirits of its fighters meet with the spirits of all the fighters who have sacrificed their lives on the soil of Palestine, ever since it was conquered by the companions of the Prophet. Allah bless him and grant him salvation, and until this day. Continuing, this covenant of the Islamic resistance movement, Hamas, clarifies its picture, reveals its identity, outlines its stand, explains its aims, speaks about its hopes, and calls for its support, adoption, and joining in ranks. Our struggle against the Jews is great and very serious. Notice this, our struggle against the Jews. It is not our struggle against Israel. You're going to see this made much more plain later on, but this is not a struggle against Israel. It is a struggle against the Jews, as in the entire race of people, or ethnic group, to be more accurate. It needs all sincere efforts. It is a step that inevitably should be followed by other steps. Notice that also. It is a step. Our struggle against the Jews is a step that inevitably should be followed by other steps. Again, I want to remind you, this is a jihadist organization. They are interested in establishing a caliphate in Israel and then building off of that caliphate, conquering other nations and subjecting them to Allah. Okay? When you think Hamas, you need not think of some group fighting for the liberation of a nation. Rather, you must think of a nation or of a group that is fighting for the religious subjugation of those whom it considers to be infidels, because that is what this group is about. Again, this will be made very, very plain, if it is not already, in the coming sections. This movement is this movement is but one squadron that should be supported by more and more squadrons from the vast Arab and Islamic world until the enemy is vanquished and Allah's victory is realized. Thus we see them coming on the horizon, and you shall learn about it hereafter. Allah hath written, verily I will prevail, and my apostles, for Allah is strong and mighty. Say to them, this is my way. I invite you to Allah by an evident demonstration, both I and he who followeth me, and praise be unto Allah, I am not an idolater. Again, you can see their citations here in the parentheses. This here says Hamas means strength and bravery, according to Al-Muajam al-Wasit. Now, again, it is important to note Hamas is an acronym for the Arabic of the phrase Islamic resistance movement. Whether or not there is another Arabic word which actually means strength and is translated Hamas, I don't actually know, unfortunately. So I can't confirm or deny that. But we already know that Hamas is an acronym. So at best, this is a coincidence. Definition of the movement. Ideological starting points. Article 1. The Islamic resistance movement. The movement's program is Islam. I'm going to say that again. The movement's program is Islam. One more time for those who are hard of hearing, for those who believe this is a religion of peace, for those who believe that this is merely a Palestinian liberation army, freedom fighters, as they like to so ridiculously claim. The movement's program, according to the movement itself, is Islam. It is not liberation of a certain stretch of land per se. That is simply one part of it, one which they themselves claim needs to be followed by other parts. No, the program of this resistance movement is Islam. They are an Islamist terrorist group. I will be sharing this over and over and over and over and over again until you have it ringing in your ears when you sleep tonight, because it needs to be said. This is not the IRA. This is not the Basque revolutionaries up in Spain. This is not the Scottish Nationalist Party. This is not even the Confederates from the Confederate States of America. And I say even just because there is some quasi-religious language you can find in the Confederate Constitution. No, this is an Islamist movement. Again, identical in aim to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS, to the Taliban, and etc. The movement's program is Islam. From it, it draws its ideas. Where does Hamas get its ideas, class? Yes, you with the sexy face over there. Oh, Mr. Teacher J, it is from Islam, according to themselves. How correct you are, Student J. I'm obviously kidding, but nevertheless. From it, from Islam, that is, it draws its ideas, ways of thinking, and understanding of the universe, life, and man. It resorts to it for judgment in all its conduct, and it is inspired by it for guidance of its steps. The Islamic resistance movement's relation with the Muslim Brotherhood, which, for those who are not aware of the history, Hamas broke out of the Greater Muslim Brotherhood back in 1988. Article 2. The Islamic resistance movement is one of the wings of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. Muslim Brotherhood movement is a universal organization which constitutes the largest Islamic movement in modern times. It is characterized by its deep understanding, accurate comprehension, and its complete embrace of all Islamic concepts of all aspects of life, culture, creed, politics, economics, education, society, justice and judgment, the spreading of Islam, education, art, information, science of the occult, and conversion to Islam. So some of this information, it is important to note, is a little bit outdated. The Muslim Brotherhood is not the largest Muslim organization at this point. In fact, it in many ways, it's not even half as strong as it once was. But nevertheless, it does still exist, and it is still very powerful, though it doesn't tend to wield the same authority that it did when this charter was initially written. Structure and formation, Article 3. The basic structure of the Islamic resistance movement consists of Muslims who have given their allegiance to Allah, whom they truly worship. Quote, I have created the jinn and humans only for the purpose of worshiping, end quote, who know their duty towards themselves, their families, and country. In all that, they fear Allah and raise the banner of jihad in the face of the oppressors so that they would rid the land of the people, of their uncleanness, vileness, and evils. Here's another quotation. But we will oppose truth to vanity, and it shall confound the same, and behold, it shall vanish away. So they're saying we should juxtapose truth to vanity. In case that sentence was a little bit unclear to you, Quranic literature is written just abysmally. So there you have that. Article 4. The Islamic resistance movement welcomes every Muslim who embraces its faith, ideology, follows its program, keeps its secrets, and wants to belong to its ranks and carry out the duty. Allah will certainly reward such one. Let me get a drink of my tea real quick. I hope you're starting to see the trend of how steeped this is in Islam. Islam, 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 Allah, 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 right? It is just, this is the movement. The movement is an Islamist movement. Time and place, extent of the Islamic resistance movement. Article 5. Time, extent of the Islamic resistance movement. By adopting Islam as its way of life, the movement goes back to the time of the birth of the Islamic message of the righteous ancestor, for Allah is its target, the Prophet, that being Muhammad, its example, and the Quran, its constitution. Its extent in place is anywhere that there are Muslims who embrace Islam as their way of life in the globe. This being so, it extends to the depths of the earth and reaches out to the heavens. I want to read that again because some might be confused and think that this is a localized movement because of the fact that its focus is currently on Palestine, as they call it, Israel, to be more accurate. But no, that is only for a moment in their eyes. Its extent in place is anywhere that there are Muslims to embrace Islam as their way of life everywhere in the globe. This being so, it extends to the depths of the earth and reaches out to the heavens. Continuing forward with a quotation. Dost thou not see how Allah putteth forth a parable representing a good word as a good tree whose root is firmly fixed in the earth and whose branches reach unto heaven, which bringeth forth its fruit in all seasons by the will of its Lord? Allah propoundeth parables unto men that they may be instructed. And again, I want to point out just how much we are seeing this charter quote and quote and quote again sheikhs, imams, the Quran, the Hadith, Islamic sources, in other words. Characteristics and independence. Article 6. The Islamic resistance movement is a distinguished Palestinian movement whose allegiance is to Allah and whose way of life is Islam. It strives to raise the banner of Allah over every inch of Palestine, for under the wing of Islam, followers of all religions can coexist in security and safety where their lives, possessions, and rights are concerned. This is, of course, an outright lie, but we will get to that in nary a moment. In the absence of Islam, strife will be rife, oppression spreads, evil prevails, and schisms and wars will break out. How excellent was the Muslim poet Muhammad Iqbal when he wrote, quote, "If faith is lost, there is no security, and there is no life for him who does not adhere to religion. He who accepts life without religion has taken annihilation as his companion for life," end quote. The universality of the Islamic resistance movement, Article 7. As a result of the fact that those Muslims who adhere to the way of the Islamic resistance movement spread all over the world, rally support for it and its stands, strive towards enhancing its struggle, the movement is a universal one. It is well equipped for that because of the clarity of its ideology, the nobility of its aim, and the loftiness of its objectives. On this basis, the movement should be viewed and evaluated, and its role be recognized. He who denies its right, evades supporting it, and turns a blind eye to facts, whether intentionally or unintentionally, would awaken to see that events have overtaken him and with no logic to justify his attitude. One should certainly learn from past examples. The injustice of next of kin is harder to bear than the smite of the Indian sword. That, of course, being a reference to the fact that Islam tried desperately to conquer India and for a long period of time even successfully did so. But I digress. Quote, "We have also sent down unto thee the book of the Quran with truth, confirming that scripture which was revealed before it, and preserving the same safe from corruption. Judge therefore between them according to that which Allah hath revealed, and follow not their desires, by swerving from the truth which hath come unto thee. Unto every of you, unto every of you have we given a law and an open path, and if Allah had pleased, we had surely made you one people. But he hath thought it fit to give you different laws, that he might try you in that which he hath given you respectively. Therefore strive to excel each other in good works. Unto Allah shall ye all return, and then will he declare, unto you that concerning which ye have disagreed." I'd like to point out very quickly as a polemic, it says here, confirming that scripture which was revealed before it. This is why David Wood gives his famous Islamic dilemma, right? Basically, the dilemma goes, if the Bible is true, then Islam is false because Islam contradicts the Bible. If the Bible is false, then Islam is false because the Quran explicitly states its intentionality to confirm the Bible before it, which is just very interesting, and you see that even present here in Hamas's own charter. But we continue on. Please remember to like and share this video, by the way, friends. Consider subscribing if you have not done so, and hit that bell to get notified every time we go live. The Islamic resistance movement is one of the links in the chain of the struggle against the Zionist invaders. It goes back to 1967. Oh, wait, that's not what it says. It goes back to 1939, to the emergence of the martyr Is al-Din, I'm going to say this correctly, I'm sorry, Is al-Din al-Qassam and his brethren, the fighters, members of Muslim Brotherhood. It goes on to reach out and become one with another chain that includes the struggle of the Palestinians and Muslim Brotherhood in the 1948 war and the jihad operations of the Muslim Brotherhood in 1968 and after. Quick notation: there is a lie spreading across the West whereby we claim that if we would simply, and by we I mean the West as well as Israel, if we would simply capitulate to their demands to have a free Judea and Samaria, which they call the West Bank, and a free Gaza, an independent Palestinian nation, in other words, then this violence could stop and we could coexist together. But notice that those borders are referenced to 1967. In fact, you may have heard many individuals over the last couple of days and weeks who have said something along the lines of 56 years of oppression, or maybe they were more general and said 50 years of oppression. We'll do the math, friends. That goes back to 1967. 1967 is when the Six-Day War began. It is when the nation of Israel actually conquered and laid claim to what we today call the West Bank, but which is properly known as Judea and Samaria, as well as the small enclave of, it's not an enclave, but the small region that we today call Gaza. It's also when they took control over the Golan Heights and the city of Jerusalem, which includes, of course, the Temple Mount. But according to the Hamas charter, this 1967 event is actually not what they mean to go back to. This struggle, you see, goes all the way back to 1939, which is well before 1967. So when these liberal morons, and excuse my French, but they are indeed morons, want to make claims that if we could just return to the 1967 borders, or if we could return to the 1947 UN partition plan, or if we could return to a pre-1973 world, that's the Yom Kippur War for those who aren't aware. For those who are claiming if we could just return to that, everything would be hunky-dory, that is wrong. Hamas tells you themselves that that is wrong. It does not go back to 1973. It does not go back to 1967. It does not even go back to 1947. It goes back to 1939. What specifically goes back to 1939? The struggle against the Zionist invaders. It's right here in the sentence directly preceding that one. Continuing forward. Moreover, if the links have been distant from each other, and if obstacles placed by those who are the lackeys of Zionism in the way of the fighters obstructed the continuation of the struggle, the Islamic resistance movement aspires to the realization of Allah's promise, no matter how long that should take. The Prophet Allah bless him, the Prophet Allah bless him and grant him salvation has said. So we are about to see a quotation from the Quran, a quotation from Muhammad himself, a quotation which the charter of Hamas agrees with. And it is thus, quote, the day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind stones and trees. The stones and trees will say, O Muslim, O Abdullah, that means servant of Allah. There is a Jew behind me. Come and slay him. Only the Garkad tree, evidently a certain kind of tree, says the parentheses here, would not do that because it is one of the trees of the Jews, which is just a very bizarre thing that we see in this particular text. Not really 100% sure why the Garkad tree is considered to be a tree of the Jews, but I digress. You can see this is related by al-Bukhari. That is Sahih al-Bukhari. That means it is Sahih. That means it is a strong hadith, as they call it, and it is recited by Sahih Muslim. Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim both attest to this being said. In other words, it is as set in stone in Islamic theology as anything could possibly be, and the Hamas charter explicitly quotes it, and I'm going to read it again because it is outright genocidal. And by the way, I would like to point out that nefarious group up in Germany in the 1940s, who I'd like to not mention for fear of getting this video taken down, although I might already be well past that point, was at least somewhat secretive with what they wanted to do. But Hamas thinks that it's a wholly unjustified thing. Reading it again, the day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews. And by the way, I said earlier, this is from the Quran. Sorry, that is not correct. This is from the Hadith. Anyways, the day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind stones and trees. The stones and trees will say, O Muslims, O Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him. Only the Garkad tree, evidently a certain kind of tree, would not do that because it is one of the trees of the Jews. Thus ends the quotation, which is labeled Sahih. That means strong. It's as strong as a hadith can possibly be labeled. And it is related by both Sahih al-Bukhari and by Sahih Muslim. The slogan of the Islamic Resistance Movement, Article 8, Allah is its target, the Prophet is its model, the Quran is its constitution. Jihad is its path, and death for the sake of Allah is the loftiest of its wishes. One of the videos we're going to see today is the Hamas leaders saying quite openly that they don't actually care if Palestinian civilians die at the hands of Israel, because to them, this makes them martyrs. This actually makes them holy fighters who have died in the cause of Allah. Islam is a death cult, friends. And the Hamas charter is quite plain with this. And notice here it says, Jihad is its path, and death for the sake of Allah is the loftiest of its wishes. Objectives, incentives, and objectives, Article 9. The Islamic resistance movement found itself at a time when Islam has disappeared from life, which is really, frankly, not true. Obviously, Iran still existed at this time. Afghanistan still existed at this time. Saudi Arabia still existed at this time. So it's just flatly not true. But whatever. It's part of their rhetoric. Thus, rules shook, concepts were upset, values changed, and evil people took control. Oppression and darkness prevailed. Cowards became like tigers. Homelands were usurped. People were scattered and were caused to wander all over the world. The state of justice disappeared, and the state of falsehood replaced it. Nothing remained in its right place. Thus, when Islam is absent from the arena, everything changes. From this state of affairs, the incentives are drawn. As for the objectives, they are the fighting against the false, defeating it and vanquishing it, so that justice could prevail, homelands could be retrieved, and from its mosques would the voice, with the voice of the muezzin emerge, declaring the establishment of the state of Islam. Notice, not the state of Palestine, the state of Islam, so that people and things would return each to their right places, and Allah is our helper. Quotation, and if Allah had not prevented men, the one by the other, verily the earth had been corrupted, but Allah is beneficent towards his creatures, end quote. Article 10, as the Islamic resistance movement paves its way, it will back the oppressed and support the wronged with all its might. It will spare no effort to bring about justice and defeat injustice in word and deed, in the place and everywhere it can reach and have influence therein. Strategies and methods. Strategies of the Islamic resistance movement. Palestine is Islamic. Article 11. The Islamic resistance movement believes that the land of Palestine is an Islamic waqif. That means a consecrated place. Saying again, the Islamic resistance movement believes that the land of Palestine is an Islamic waqif, consecrated for the future Muslim generations until the judgment day. It, or any part of it, should not be squandered. It, or any part of it, should not be given up. This is an incredibly important thing for us to point out, friends, because again, there is a lie in the West that many people have bought into that says if we could just give the Palestinians a state, if the Israelis, mean as they are and brutal as they are and so uber super rude as they are, would just simply give the Palestinians a state, if we could return to the 1967 borders, if we could just stop bombing Hamas after they murder 1,400 civilians, then we could all live in peace, don't you see? But this is a lie. And frankly, I would like to be very clear here. There is not a human being on this planet stupider than a Western progressive. They literally see what people are claiming. They see and hear what people are saying with their own ears and with their own eyes. And they say, nope, I don't believe it. You, silly little Muslim, may believe that your struggle against the Zionists goes back to 1939. You, silly little Muslim, may believe that your fight is against the Jews and the judgment day will not come about until and up until we have slaughtered all the Jews. You, silly little Muslim, may believe that you don't actually want to support a Jewish state and that you don't support the right of the Jews to actually exist in the state of Israel. You, silly little Muslim, may believe all these things, but I, Ivy Tower, Ivy League, Western progressive, know otherwise. That is one of the stupidest and, quite frankly, most racist things I have ever heard in my entire life. It is not simply the bigotry of low expectations. It's, as Immortal Technique would say, stay in your placeism. I know better than you, silly little Muslim, what your Quran teaches. I know better than you, silly little Muslim, what your objectives actually are, what you feel in your heart of hearts. I know better than you. From my air-conditioned ivory palace eating my bagel with cream cheese and lox. And unfortunately, I have to word it that way because some of the most anti-Israel people in this country happen to also be Jews, looking at you, Bernie Sanders, which is just baffling to me. I, being a Jew, don't understand that at all. And by the way, even if I wasn't a Jew, I still wouldn't understand that at all. But anyways. It or any part of it, that is what they call Palestine, what we call Israel, should not be squandered. It or any part of it should not be given up. Neither a single Arab country, nor all Arab countries, neither any king or president, nor all the kings and presidents, neither any organization, nor all of them, be they Palestinian or Arab, possess the right to do that. So according to Hamas, Palestine doesn't even have the right to give up any of this land. Palestine doesn't have the right to let Tel Aviv and Haifa and all these other nations and cities, and what we call Israel proper exist. They don't have that right. Allah says otherwise, according to Hamas. Palestine is an Islamic waqif. Again, that is consecrated land. It is land consecrated for Muslim generations until Judgment Day. This being so, who could claim to have the right to represent Muslim generations till Judgment Day? This is the law governing the land of Palestine in the Islamic Sharia law. And the same goes for any land the Muslims have conquered by force, because during the times of Islamic conquest, the Muslims consecrated these lands to Muslim generations till the day of judgment. By the way, friends, this should be seriously, seriously, seriously concerning for you. And I must stress the seriously's over and over and over again, because if you've ever seen a map from the Middle Ages, you would know. In fact, I have a good friend who plays Crusader Kings. It's a video game detailing so that the backdrop of it is the history of that time, right? He even, in fact, watches this program sometime. He might be watching it right now. And he could tell you, as could any history buff tell you, that Islam has conquered an awful lot of land that it does not currently possess. For example, Spain. For example, Greece. For example, Dearborn, Michigan. Oh, wait, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. That's a more modern one, but nevertheless, you get the idea. In fact, maybe I'll show you that map when we're done reading through this covenant. So according to Hamas, that means Spain, that means Greece, that means the areas in the Balkans, which were also under the control of the Turks. That means any area in Africa, which has been conquered by them, any area in the Middle East, which has been conquered by them, India, which at some point was conquered by them, and yes, indeed, Dearborn, Michigan. That means these lands are not only Islamic, but that no Muslim, and even no collection of Muslims, has the right to give them up. It is an utterly absurd notion when any leftist comes up and says this group can be reasoned with. They're just simply freedom fighters. No, they're telling you in their document that Spain belongs to them, not just Israel. That India belongs to them, not just Israel. Greece belongs to them. The Balkans belong to them, not just Israel. And it is an insane notion that this is going to stop with Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. Insane. It is not stupid, although I called it stupid earlier. It's not even blind, because you can see it. It is straight up delusional. It's crazy. These people are nuts. They're out of their mind. They should be locked in wards with those fancy little coats that tie your arms behind your back so that you aren't able to move and hurt other people. It is completely bonkers. Anyways, I'm giving too much commentary. Let's go back. Let's go back. Reading again, this is the law governing the land of Palestine in the Islamic Sharia law, and the same goes for any land the Muslims have conquered by force. The same goes for any land the Muslims have conquered by force, according to Hamas. I didn't write this, they did. Because during the times of Islamic conquest, the Muslims consecrated these lands to Muslim generations till the day of judgment. In other words, all of these lands are waqifs according to Hamas. It happened like this. When the leaders of the Islamic armies conquered Syria and Iraq, they sent to the Caliph of the Muslims, Umar bin al-Khattab, asking for his advice concerning the conquered land, whether they should divide it amongst the soldiers or leave it for its owners or what. After consultations and discussions between the Caliph of the Muslims, Omar bin al-Khattab, and companions of the Prophet, Allah bless him and grant him salvation, it was decided that the land should be left with its owners who could benefit by its fruit. As for the real ownership of the land and the land itself, it should be consecrated for Muslim generations till Judgment Day. Those who are on the land are there only to benefit from its fruit. The waqif remains as long as earth and heaven remain. Any procedure in contradiction to Islamic Sharia where Palestine is concerned is null and void. Again, any procedure in contradiction to Islamic Sharia where Palestine is concerned is null and void, and you can fill in the blanks and say where any land Muslims have conquered by force is concerned is null and void, because they have already filled in those blanks for you. Here's another quotation. Verily, this is a certain truth. Wherefore, praise the name of thy Lord, the great Allah. End quote. Homeland and nationalism from the point of view of the Islamic resistance movement in Palestine. Article 12. Nationalism, from the point of view of the Islamic resistance movement, is part of the religious creed. Nothing in nationalism is more significant or deeper than in the case when an enemy should tread Muslim land. Resisting and quelling the enemy becomes the individual duty of every Muslim male or female. A woman can go out to fight the enemy without her husband's permission, and so does the slave without his master's permission, which, by the way, you guys want to talk about patriarchy in the West. I mean, I am a biblical patriarchist. But my goodness, I don't think that my wife needs my permission to leave the house. And in case any of y'all think Saudi Arabia is crazy for thinking that, well, no, they're just Muslim. They're not crazy. They're just Muslims. Your problem is with Islam. It ain't with Saudi Arabia. Albeit Saudi Arabia is the one carrying it out. Nothing of the sort is to be found in any other regime. This is an undisputed fact. If other nationalist movements are connected with materialistic, human, or regional causes, nationalism of the Islamic resistance movement has all these elements as well as the more important elements that give it soul and life. It is connected to the source of spirit and the grantor of life, hoisting in the sky of the homeland the heavenly banner that joins earth and heaven with a strong bond. If Moses comes and throws his staff, both witch and magic are annulled. Quote, now if the right direction manifestly distinguished from deceit, whoever therefore shall deny Tagut and believe in Allah, he shall surely take hold with a strong handle, which shall not be broken. Allah is he who heareth and seeth. End quote. Peaceful solutions, initiatives, and internal conferences, Article 13. Initiatives and so-called peaceful solutions and international conferences, I said internal, sorry, that was international, and international conferences, are in contradiction to the principles of the Islamic resistance movement. I am going to say that again for those of you who may be hard of hearing. Initiatives and so-called peaceful solutions and international conferences are in contradiction to the principles of the Islamic resistance movement. Oh, if we could just go back to the 1967 borders, if Israel would just call a ceasefire and quit bombing hospitals that actually turned out to not even be bombed, and the missile that came out actually was a Palestinian missile anyways. But on top of that, they only blew up a freaking carport. If we would just do this, if the Jews would just be nice, if the West would just be nice, everything would go back to normal. Boulder Dash, friends, it's garbage. It's crap. Your liberal friend is an idiot. Sorry, he's not an idiot. He's crazy. He's a crazy person. From Hamas's own words, not mine, all peaceful solutions and international conferences are in contradiction to the principles of the Islamic resistance movement. That is Hamas. A two-state solution is in contradiction to the principles of Hamas. That is a fact from their own covenant, Article 13 of their covenant. We are reading it to you right now. So stop with the nonsense. Abusing any part, the covenant continues, abusing any part of Palestine is abuse directed against part of religion. Nationalism of the Islamic resistance movement is part of its religion. Its members have been fed on that. For the sake of hoisting the banner of Allah over the homeland they fight, Allah will be prominent, but most people do not know. Now and then, the call goes out for the convening of an international conference to look for ways of solving the Palestinian question. Some accept, others reject the idea for this or other reason, with one stipulation or more for consent to convening the conference and participating in it. Knowing the parties constituting the conference, their past and present attitudes towards Muslim problems, the Islamic resistance movement does not consider these conferences capable of realizing the demands, restoring the rights, or doing justice to the oppressed. These conferences are only ways of setting the infidels in the land of the Muslims as arbiters, or arbitrators, rather. Excuse me, no, it is arbiters. Sorry. Arbitrators. My goodness, I can read, I promise. Arbitrators. When did the infidels do justice to the believers? See, so they don't even think you're capable of doing justice to them. Another quote, but the Jews will not be pleased with thee, neither the Christians, until thou follow their religion. Say, the direction of Allah is the true direction, and verily if thou follow their desire and the knowledge which hath been given thee, thou shalt find no patron or protector against Allah. End quote. There is, the covenant continues, there is no solution to the Palestinian question except through jihad. I'm going to say it again. The covenant says, there is no solution to the Palestinian question except through jihad. It continues, initiatives, proposals, and international conferences are all a waste of time and vain endeavors. The Palestinian people know better than to consent to having their future rights and fate toyed with. As is said in the honorable hadith, quote, the people of Syria are Allah's lash in his hand, or in his land, rather. He wreaks his vengeance through them against whosoever he wishes among his slaves. It is unthinkable that those who are double-faced among them should prosper over the faithful. They will certainly die out of grief and desperation. End quote. Article 14, the three circles. The question of the liberation of Palestine is bound to three circles: the Palestinian circle, the Arab circle, and the Islamic circle. Each of these circles has its role in the struggle against Zionism. Each has its duties, and it is a horrible mistake and sign of deep ignorance to overlook any of these circles. Palestine is an Islamic land which has the first of the two Qiblas, direction to which Muslims turn in praying, the third of the holy Islamic sanctuaries, and the point of departure from Muhammad's midnight journey to the seven heavens, i.e. Jerusalem. For those who do not know, it is believed by the Muslim religion that where the Dome of the Rock currently stands is where Muhammad ascended into the heavens. Quote, praise be unto him who transported his servant by night from the sacred temple of Mecca, there you go, to the farther temple of Jerusalem, the circuit of which he the circuit of which we have blessed, that we might show him some of our signs. For Allah is he who heareth and seeth, end quote. Speaking about Muhammad's night journey. Since this is the case, the covenant continues, liberation of Palestine is then an individual duty for every Muslim wherever he may be. On this basis, the problem should be viewed. This should be realized by every Muslim. If you've ever wondered why it is the Muhammad Hijab, who is not from Palestine and whose ancestors are not from Palestine, is up in London talking about, hey, Piers Morgan, you should be supporting Hamas, this is why. The day the problem is dealt with on this basis, when the three circles mobilize their capabilities, the present state of affairs will change and the day of liberation will come nearer. Quote, verily ye are stronger than they by reason of the terror cast into their breasts from Allah. By the way, let's repeat that. By reason of the terror cast into their breasts by Allah. The reason Muslims use terrorism so much is because it's part of their religion. This because they are not people of prudence, end quote. The jihad for the liberation of Palestine is an individual duty, Article 15. The day that enemies usurp part of Muslim land, jihad becomes the individual duty of every Muslim. In face of the Jews' usurpation of Palestine, it is compulsory that the banner of jihad be raised. To do this requires the diffusion of Islamic consciousness among the masses, both on the regional, Arab, and Islamic levels. It is necessary to instill the spirit of jihad in the heart of the nation so that they would confront the enemies and join the ranks of the fighters. It is necessary that scientists, educators, and teachers, information and media people, as well as the educated masses, especially the youth and sheiks of the Islamic movement, should take part in the operation of awakening the masses. It is important that basic changes be made in the school curriculum to cleanse it out of the traces of ideological invasion that affected it as a result of the Orientalists and missionaries who infiltrated the region following the defeat of the Crusaders at the hands of Salah al-Din, otherwise known as Saladin. The Crusaders realized that it was impossible to defeat the Muslims without first having ideological invasion pave the way by upsetting their thoughts, disfiguring their heritage, and violating their ideals. Only then could they invade with soldiers. This, in its turn, paved the way for the imperialistic invasion that made Allenby declare on entering Jerusalem, "Only now have the Crusades ended." General Guru stood at Salah al-Din's grave and said, quote, "We have returned, O Salah al-Din," end quote. Imperialism has helped towards the strengthening of ideological invasion, deepening and still does its roots. All this has paved the way towards the loss of Palestine. If that sounds an awful lot like the anti-colonialist rhetoric that you hear from the modern liberal, that's not a coincidence. And it goes back to what Ben Shapiro and David Wood and Robert Spencer and so many others have pointed out before, which is there is a red-green alliance. Red representing social Marxism and green representing Islamism. There's an alliance between them. Why? Because they have a mutual enemy. That enemy is the West. Continuing forward. Oh, and by the way, in case anybody denies what I'm currently saying, ask yourself this question. In the 1960s, what was the quote-unquote black religion? Now, I want to be perfectly clear here. I'm not saying there is any black religion. But amongst those who were advocates of an anti-Western idea, what was the religion they typically adhered to? I'll give you a hint. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Muhammad Ali, etc. That's right, it was Islam. That's why there's a nation of Islam. That's why Louis Farrakhan, who is known as a civil rights leader, is considered a leader in Islam. But anyways, we continue. That's a story for another time. It is necessary to instill in the minds of the Muslim generations that the Palestinian problem is a religious problem. Again, this is a jihadist group. It is not a Palestinian liberation group. It is a jihadist group. The Palestinian problem is a religious problem and should be dealt with on this basis. Palestine contains Islamic holy sites. In it, there is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is bound to the great mosque in Mecca in an inseparable bond as long as heaven and earth speak of Isra, Muhammad's midnight journey to the seven heavens, and Miraj, Muhammad's ascension to the seven heavens from Jerusalem. By the way, it is no coincidence that this current attack, the attack on Israel that left 1,400 innocent Jewish civilians dead on October the 7th, 2023, it is no coincidence that the title of that, the code name that Hamas gave to that attack was Al-Aqsa Flood, because Al-Aqsa is the name of the mosque that we call Dome of the Rock. It is necessary to instill in the minds of the Muslim generations that the Palestinian problem is a religious problem. I just want to say that again so it is made perfectly clear. Again, I want that to be ringing in your ears as you sleep tonight. Quote, "The bond of one day for the sake of Allah is better than the world and whatever there is on it. The place of one's whip is paradise. The place of one's whip in paradise, is far better than the world and whatever there is on it. A worshipper's going and coming from the service of Allah is better than the world and whatever there is on it," end quote. And this is a hadith from Al-Bukhari, but you can also see it's from Muslim, Al-Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah. Quote, "I swear by the holder of Muhammad's soul that I would like to invade and be killed for the sake of Allah, then invade and be killed, and then invade and again be killed," end quote. That is related by Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. It is a direct quotation of Muhammad. He quite literally said, when people want to say, "Oh, this is a religion of peace, religion of peace, religion of peace," the founder, Muhammad, said that he would like to invade and be killed for the sake of Allah, and then invade and be killed, and then invade again and be killed. This is a war cult, friends. And you might say, "But CJ, I have Muslim friends. I have Muslim friends, and they're not like this." Right. I have Christian friends who wouldn't know a Bible verse if it smacked them across the face. I have Buddhist friends who think that Buddhism is having a Zen garden and dyeing your hair pink. I have Shinto friends who couldn't name one Shinto deity if you literally spelled it out in front of them. There's a lot of nominal religious folks in the world, my friends. That does not mean anything about what the religion actually teaches. Now, those people obviously have a right to religious freedom. I want to be very clear on that. We live in the United States of America. Some of my audience is in Canada. And we believe in religious freedom here. Okay. So I am not by any means suggesting that these people need to be persecuted or anything like that. I'm also not saying that your Muslim friend who doesn't believe these things is somehow evil or anything along those lines. I actually much prefer the nominal Muslim who doesn't take these things seriously. But when you meet a Jew who eats ham sandwiches, and when you meet a Muslim who is anti-jihad, you're talking about the same person. You're talking about a person who, unfortunately or fortunately, probably depends on the individual religion, really doesn't take their faith as seriously as these guys in Hamas do. Like I said, if I was a Muslim, you best believe I would be a member of Hamas, because that is what the religion teaches. Now, don't take that out of context. I have no intention on being a member of Hamas because I have no intention of being a Muslim. But nevertheless, and again, I do want to be clear on this. This is not a attempt to rally hatred of Muslims. I want to be very, very clear on that, because a lot of people, I have a feeling my audience is wise enough to understand that, but I know a lot of people could get their hands on this and say, oh, see, he hates Muslims. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. As a man who attends a religious service at least once a week and reads a book that some people find superstitious and funny, and even descends from a group that is prone to wear funny little hats and have little curls on their head, I am 100% on board for religious liberty, even including, by the way, for the guys who are taking this stuff seriously, like Mohammed and stuff like that. So long as they're not actively hurting anybody, the First Amendment does stand. But again, that changes absolutely nothing about what the religion itself teaches. And more specifically, to the point of today's episode, it changes absolutely nothing about what Hamas believes. Hamas is not interested in returning to the 1967 borders. Hamas is interested in establishing a global Islamic caliphate that is based in Palestine, as they would call it. The Education of the Generations, Article 16. It is necessary to follow Islamic orientation in educating the Islamic generations in our region by teaching the religious duties, comprehensive study of the Quran, and the study of the Prophet's Sunnah, that is, his sayings and doings, and learning about Islamic history and heritage from their authentic sources. This should be done by specialized and learned people using a curriculum that would be healthily formed, healthily form the thoughts and faith of the Muslim student. Side by side with this, a comprehensive study of the enemy, his human and financial capabilities, learning about his points of weakness and his strengths, and getting to know the forces supporting and helping him should also be included. Also, it is important to be acquainted with the current events, to follow what is new, and to study the analysis and commentaries made of these events. Planning for the present and future, studying every trend appearing, is a must, so that the fighting Muslim would live knowing his aim, objective, and his way in the midst of what is going on around him. And by the way, this explains that green-red alliance that I was talking about earlier. They know for a fact what they are doing. They know that they have no intention of letting, for example, homosexuals and feminists exist in their country. But they also have made it part of their charter that they need to keep up with the times. They need to understand the weaknesses of their enemy. They need to understand the things which makes him vulnerable, the things which makes him tick, his finances, his human capabilities, all these different things. And in having a good and solid understanding of these things, they're able to say, hey, you know what? I think that it would be a good idea for us to ally with these who hate the West. Why? Well, because they hate the West. They can bring it down from the inside. Anyways, continuing. The role of Muslim women, Article 17. The Muslim woman has a role no less important than that of the Muslim man in the battle of liberation. She is the maker of men. Her role in guiding and educating the new generations is great. The enemies have realized the importance of her role. They consider that if they are able to direct and bring her up in the way they wish, far from Islam, they would have won the battle. This is something I just want to point out very briefly. It's interesting to me. We'll have people like Mia Khalifa, a former porn star, by the way. And former is in air quotes there because, to the best of my knowledge, she does still have an OnlyFans. And it was recently reported that she was fired from Playboy after her anti-Semitic comments, which of course implies that she was working for Playboy, which you may or may not be familiar with, is a pornography company. But when people like her talk about like, oh, Palestinian liberation, Palestinian liberation, Palestinian liberation, and yet here in Hamas's charter, it talks about how, oh, the West tries to have these women raised up far from Islam. For example, like Mia Khalifa. But anyways, the stupidity of that dingbat aside, I probably shouldn't say that. That's not particularly kind of me. But she is a useful idiot for the cause of Islam. That is why you find them giving these attempts constant attention through information campaigns, films, and the school curriculum, using for that purpose their lackeys who are infiltrated through Zionist organizations under various names and shapes, such as Freemasons, Rotary clubs, espionage groups, and others, which are all nothing more than cells of subversion and saboteurs. These organizations have ample resources that enable them to play their role in societies for the purpose of achieving the Zionist targets and to deepen the concepts that would serve the enemy. So, the whole world is controlled by the Jews, don't you know? Anyways, these organizations operate in the absence of Islam and its estrangement from its people, amongst its people. The Islamic peoples should perform their roles in confronting the conspiracies of these saboteurs. The day Islam is in control of guiding the affairs of life, these organizations, hostile to humanity and Islam, will be obliterated. Article 18. Women in the home of the fighting family, whether she is a mother or a sister, plays the most important role in looking after the family, rearing the children, and imbuing them with moral values and thoughts derived from Islam. She has to teach them to perform the religious duties in preparation for the role of fighting awaiting them. That is why it is necessary to pay great attention to schools and the curriculum followed in educating Muslim girls, so that they would grow up to be good mothers, aware of their role in the battle of liberation. She has to be of sufficient knowledge and understanding where the performance of housekeeping matters are concerned, because economy and avoidance of waste of the family budget is one of the requirements for the ability to continue moving forward in the difficult conditions surrounding us. She should put before her eyes the fact that the money available to her is just like blood, which should never flow except through the veins, so that both children and grown-ups could continue to live. Quote, verily, the Muslims of either sex, and the true believers of either sex, and the devout men and the devout women, and the men of veracity and the women of veracity, and the patient men and the patient women, and the humble men and the humble women, and the almsgivers of either sex who remember Allah frequently, for them hath Allah prepared forgiveness and a great reward. End quote. That's from the Confederates, verse 25. The role of Islamic art in the battle of liberation. Article 19. Art has regulations and measures by which it can be determined whether it is Islamic or pre-Islamic, that is, Jahili art. The issues of Islamic liberation are in need of Islamic art that would take the spirit high without raising one side of human nature above the other, but rather raise all of them harmoniously as in equilibrium. Man is a unique and wonderful creature, made out of a handful of clay and a breath from Allah. Islamic art addresses man on this basis, while pre-Islamic art addresses the body, giving preference to the clay component in it. The book, the article, the bulletin, the sermon, the thesis, the popular poem, the poetic ode, the song, the play, and others containing the characteristics of Islamic art, then these are among the requirements of ideological mobilization, renewed food for the journey, and recreation for the soul. The road is long and suffering is plenty. The soul will be bored, but Islamic art renews the energies, resurrects the movement, arousing in them lofty meanings and proper conduct. Nothing can improve the self if it is in retreat except shifting from one mood to another. All this is utterly serious and no jest, for those who are fighters do not jest. So, there's that very fun moment or fun little article we have there. This is an all-encompassing movement too. I'd like you guys to note that, right? This is an all-encompassing movement. They are not simply talking about warfare. They're also talking about art and how you rear a family, education, the sciences, politics, etc. This is, again, an all encompassing movement. Get a drink of my tea here, real quick. I have this peppermint bark tea that it's an herbal tea that just came out because of the fact that it's the Christmas season. I mean, we're still 2 months away. But the point is, it's delicious and you should drink some. And I'm not sponsored, I promise. Anyways, back to what we are addressing here. Article 20, social mutual responsibility. Muslim society is a mutually responsible society. The Prophet, prayers and greetings be unto him, said, "Blessed are the generous, whether they are in town or on a journey, who have collected all that they had and shared it equally among themselves." End quote. The Islamic spirit, excuse me, the Islamic spirit is what should prevail in every Muslim society. The society that confronts a vicious enemy with acts in a way similar to Nazism, making no differentiation between men and women, between children and old people, such a society is entitled to this Islamic spirit. Now, that's a very interesting sentence there, is it not? The society that confronts a vicious enemy with which acts in a similar way to Nazism, excuse me, the society that confronts a vicious enemy which acts in a way similar to Nazism, so Zionism is similar to Nazism according to these guys, making no differentiation between men and women, between children and old people, such a society is entitled to the Islamic spirit. Which I only wanted to say that because of the fact that they say quite explicitly that they think Zionism and Nazism are related to each other. Which, of course, is very interesting because the Imam who led Palestine during World War II, which at that point, of course, was under the control of the British and not the Arabs, but I digress. That individual was, of course, an ally of Adolf Hitler. But nevertheless, it's the rhetoric, and we continue forward. Our enemy relies on the methods of collective punishment. So you remember what you've been hearing in the news, right? Aren't you guys just collectively punishing the Palestinians for what Hamas has done? Where does that talking point come from? It comes directly from Hamas's charter. Read it again. Our enemies rely on the methods of collective punishment. He has deprived people of their homeland and properties, pursued them in their places of exile and gathering, breaking bones, shooting at women, children, and old people, with or without a reason. The enemy has opened detention camps where thousands and thousands of people are thrown and kept under subhuman conditions. Added to this are the demolition of houses, rendering children orphans, melting cruel sentences against thousands of young people, and causing them to spend the best years of their lives in the dungeons of prisons. In their Nazi treatment, the Jews made no exceptions for women and children. It's so interesting to me to say that the Jews are Nazis. It's like literally that's like the one thing that you can't be is Nazi and Jewish. It's the only thing. Anyways, their policy of striking fear in the heart is meant for all. They attack people where their breadwinning is concerned, extorting their money and threatening their honor. They deal with people as it were, or as if they were, the worst war criminals. Deportation from the homeland is a kind of murder. So you can't even deport these guys because according to them, that's a kind of murder. Also, isn't it interesting that they say, hey, this society makes no separation between men and women and old people and young people and all this kind of stuff. And then they literally paraglide into Israel and slaughter 1,400 people, the overwhelming majority of which are innocent civilians. In fact, if you think about the fact that they shot up an EDM festival, I mean, what kind of people typically go to raves? It's definitely not Orthodox Jews, and it's definitely not conservative Christians, and it's not Messianic Jews, and it's not Hasidic Jews, and it's not Karaite Jews, and it's not conservative Zionists. It's, for the most part, people on the social progressive side, people on the religious progressive side, people on the politically progressive side. And they murdered a bunch of those people, mostly women and children, of course. And by children, I do mean teenagers, but nevertheless. To counter these deeds, it is necessary that social mutual responsibility should prevail among the people. The enemy should be faced by the people as a single body, which, if one member of it should complain, the rest of the body would respond by feeling the same pains. If you've ever wondered why the Gaza Strip democratically elected Hamas to represent them, that is why. Article 21. Mutual social responsibility means extending assistance, financial or moral, to all those who are in need and joining in the execution of some of the work. Members of the Islamic resistance movement should consider the interests of the masses as their own personal interests. They must spare no effort in achieving and preserving them. They must prevent any foul play with the future of the upcoming generations and anything that could cause loss to society. The masses are part of them, and they are part of the masses. Their strength lies in theirs, and their future is theirs. Members of the Islamic resistance movement should share the people's joy and grief, adopt the demands of the public, and whatever means by which they could be realized. The day that such a spirit prevails, brotherliness would deepen, cooperation, sympathy, and unity would be enhanced, and the ranks will be solidified to confront the enemies. Supportive forces behind the enemy. I'd say we're close to done, but we're only kind of close to done. I hope you guys are finding this edifying. If you are, please consider liking and sharing this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so, and please consider hitting that bell to get notified every time that we go live. I did tell you guys this would be a doozy of an episode, but that's why it is a special report and not just your standard watchdog. Anyways, Article 22. Let me go ahead and get another drink of my tea here. Oh, no. Okay. Get another drink of my tea here. Man, there's so much other stuff I wanted to show you guys too, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe it would be a bad idea, but at the same time, I want this to be comprehensive. It's okay. We're near done. We have 15 articles left. Article 22. For a long time, the enemies have been planning skillfully and with precision for the achievement of what they have attained. They took into consideration the causes affecting the current events. They strived to amass a great deal of substantive material wealth, which they devoted to the realization of their dreams. With their money, they took control of the world media, news agencies, the press, publishing houses, broadcasting stations, and others. With their money, they stirred revolutions in various parts of the world with the purpose of achieving their interests and reaping the fruit therein. They were behind the French Revolution, the Communist Revolution, and most of the revolutions we heard and hear about here and there. So, of course, the Jews, right? It's all the Jews' fault. The Jews' fault. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and drop something in the live chat. If you guys would ever like to use this hashtag, which I use mockingly to make fun of people who have these kind of conspiracy theories, please do so. I looked in the live chat here and saw this. That's funny. I don't know who you are, Sean, but thank you for being here. Appreciate you. And that's hilarious. I love that. Anyways, yeah, see, the Jews were behind the French Revolution, and the Jews were behind the Communist Revolution, and the Jews were behind the Freemasons, and the Jews were behind Rotary clubs and the Lions, and you know, it's all just the Jews. Anyways, with their money, they formed secret societies such as Freemasons, Rotary clubs, the Lions, and others in different parts of the world for the purpose of sabotaging societies and achieving Zionist interests, because of course they did. Duh, Jews. With their money, they were able to control imperialistic countries and instigate them to colonize many countries in order to enable them to exploit their resources and spread corruption there. You may speak as much as you want about regional and world wars. They, remember, they is the Jews, were behind World War I when they were able to destroy the Islamic Caliphate, making financial gains and controlling resources. By the way, it's important to note that nobody actually wanted Turkey to get involved. Turkey decided to get involved. So that was entirely on them, because that's what they're talking about when they say the Islamic Caliphate. Let's see, where was I here? Yeah. They obtained the Balfour Declaration, formed the League of Nations through which they could rule the world. Woodrow Wilson did that. He was very much an anti-Semite. Just want to point that out. They were behind World War II, even though, of course, they didn't do anything to start World War II. That was Adolf Hitler and Hideki Tojo and Benito Mussolini and arguably Franklin Delano Roosevelt a little bit, but obviously he was responding to something that was very negative. So, you know, important to note that he is still Well, I don't like him as a president, but he was a good wartime leader for sure, for certain. Anyways, they were behind World War II, through which they made huge financial gains by trading in armaments and paved the way for the establishment of their state. It was they who instigated the replacement of the League of Nations with the United Nations and the Security Council to enable them to rule the world through them. There is no war going on anywhere without having their finger on it. Don't you see? The Jews have caused every war in the history of the world. The Jews are the ones in control of the United Nations Security Council, don't you know? The Jews, 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 the Jews. Oh, by the way, the Jews. Quote, so often as they shall kindle a fire for war, Allah shall extinguish it. And they shall set their minds to act corruptly in the earth, but Allah loveth not the corrupt doers, end quote. The imperialistic forces in the capitalist West and communist East support the enemy with all their might in money and in men. By the way, that's just factually false. Not only is the EU very much pro-Palestine, and even many here in America very pro-Palestine, but the USSR and communist China and Cuba have always been very much anti-Israel. In fact, Cuba has even sent soldiers to fight against Israel. Most recently being in 1973 Yom Kippur War. Hamas knows this, but Hamas is still itself very anti-communist. Again, useful idiots. These forces take turns in doing that. The day Islam appears, the forces of infidelity would unite to challenge it, for the infidels are of one nation. Quote, O true believers, contract not an intimate friendship with any besides yourselves. They will not fail to corrupt you. Notice, O true believers, contract not an intimate friendship with any besides yourselves. Those Westerners out there who have these ridiculous things like queers for Palestine, these are not your friends. They say themselves explicitly that they are not your friends. They say to have no intimate friendship whatsoever with any besides yourselves, that is, any besides other Muslims. Continuing with the quote, they will not fail to corrupt you. They wish for that which may cause you to perish. Their hatred hath already appeared from out of their mouths. But what their breasts conceal is yet more inveterate. We have already shown you signs of their ill will towards you, if ye understand, end quote. It is not in vain that the verse is ended with Allah's words, if ye understand. Our attitudes towards Islamic movements. And notice it says Islamic movements. So the following articles are a collection of their attitudes towards various groups, starting with Islamic movements. Article 23. The Islamic resistance movement views other Islamic movements with respect and appreciation. It is where at variance with them on one point or opinion, if it were at variance with them on one point or opinion, it is in agreement with them on other points and understandings. It considers these movements, if they reveal good intentions and dedication to Allah, that they fall into the category of those who are trying hard, since they act within the Islamic circle. Each active person has his share. The Islamic resistance movement considers all these movements as a fund for itself. It prays for Allah, for guidance and direction for all, and it spares no effort to keep the banner of unity raised, ever striving for its realization in accordance with the Quran and the Prophet's directives. Quote, and cleave all of you unto the covenant of Allah, and depart not from it, and remember the favor of Allah towards you. Since you were enemies, and he reconciled your hearts, and you became companions and brethren by his favor, and ye were on the brink of a pit of fire, and he delivered you thence, Allah declareth unto you his signs, that ye may be directed. Article 24. The Islamic resistance movement does not allow slandering or speaking ill of individuals or groups, for the believer does not indulge in such malpractices. It is necessary to differentiate between this behavior and the stands taken by certain individuals and groups. Whenever those stands are erroneous, the Islamic resistance movement preserves the right to expound the error and to warn against it. It will strive to show the right path and to judge the case in question with objectivity. Wise conduct is indeed the target of the believer who follows it wherever he discerns it. Quote, Allah loveth not the speaking ill of anyone in public, unless he who is injured calls for assistance, and Allah heareth and knoweth. Whether ye publish a good action or conceal it or forgive evil, verily Allah is gracious and powerful. End quote. Need another drink here. Sorry, my voice is getting raspy after nearly 2 hours of reading through this. Hope you guys are understanding there. All right. Man, I love this tea. This stuff is just so delicious. All right. Moving forward. B. So this is the second group that they have their attitudes towards. Nationalist movements in the Palestinian arena. Article 25. The Islamic resistance movement respects these movements and appreciates their circumstances and the conditions surrounding and affecting them. This would include, by the way, groups like the PLO. It encourages them as long as they do not give their allegiance to the communist East or the crusading West. It confirms to all those who are integrated in it or sympathetic towards it that the Islamic resistance movement is a fighting movement that has a moral and enlightened look of life and the way it should cooperate with the other movements. It detests opportunism and desires only the good of people, individuals, and groups alike. It does not seek material gains, personal fame, nor does it look for a reward from others. It works with its own resources and whatever it is at its disposal, and prepare them for whatever force you can. For the fulfillment of the duty and the earning of Allah's favor, it has no other desire than that. Next paragraph. The movement assures all the nationalist trends operating in the Palestinian arena for the liberation of Palestine that it is there for their support and assistance. So, by the way, Benjamin Netanyahu actually wanted to kind of keep Hamas around a little bit because he thought that a weak Hamas would weaken the PLO. That was a terrible miscalculation. If he would have just simply read Article 25 of their own charter, he would have seen that that is incredibly stupid. But, you know, even brilliant politicians are prone to make very stupid mistakes. The movement assures all the nationalist trends operating in the Palestinian arena for the liberation of Palestine. I just read that, sorry. Anything contrary or, no, wait, hang on. Yeah, right here is where we need. It will never be more than that, both in words and deeds, now and in the future. It is there to bring together and not to divide, to preserve and not to squander, to unify and not to throw asunder. It evaluates every good word, sincere effort, and good offices. It closes the door in the face of side disagreements and does not lend an ear to rumors and slanders, while at the same time fully realizing the right for self-defense. Anything contrary or contradictory to these trends is a lie disseminated by enemies or their lackeys for the purpose of sowing confusion, disrupting the ranks, and occupy them with side issues. Which I must say, as much as I despise this group, they are intelligent, certainly. And that is an example of their intelligence. And frankly, it was a fatal flaw in Benjamin Netanyahu in thinking that he could, you know, do the whole feudalist thing and have pit these two groups against each other, thus leaving either too weak to fight him. Anything contrary or contradictory to these, I just read that. Quote, O true believers, if a wicked man come unto you with a tale, inquire strictly into the truth thereof, lest ye hurt people through ignorance and afterwards repent of what ye have done. End quote. Article 26. In viewing the Palestinian nationalist movements that give allegiance neither to the West nor the East, in this positive way, the Islamic resistance movement does not refrain from discussing new situations on the regional or international levels where the Palestinian question is concerned. It does that in such an objective manner, revealing the extent of how much it is in harmony or contradiction with the national interests in the light of the Islamic point of view. Specifically, its attitude towards the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Article 27, is the PLO, right? Yasser Arafat's group. It's currently led by Mahmoud Abbas. The Palestinian Liberation Organization is the closest to the heart of the Islamic resistance movement. Again, I'm sorry, Netanyahu, but you are a moron. I shouldn't say that. I want to make sure I'm tempering my tongue because it was a dumb move. That's what I want to say. It was a dumb move to think you could pit these two organizations against each other. Anyways, the Palestinian Liberation Organization is the closest to the heart of the Islamic resistance movement. It contains the father and the brother, the next of kin, and the friend. The Muslim does not estrange himself from his father, brother, next of kin, or friend. Our homeland is one, our situation is one, our fate is one, and the enemy is a joint enemy to all of us. Because of the situation surrounding the formation of the organization, of the ideological confusion prevailing in the Arab world as a result of the ideological invasion under whose influence the Arab world has fallen since the defeat of the Crusaders, which was and still is intensified through Orientalist missionaries and imperialists, the organization adopted the idea of the secular state, and that is how we view it. Secularism completely contradicts religious ideology. Well, you got that part right. Attitudes, conducts, and decisions stem from ideologies. That is why, with all our appreciation to the Palestinian Liberation Organization and what it can develop into, and without belittling its role in the Arab-Israeli conflict, we are unable to exchange the present or future Islamic Palestine with the secular idea. The Islamic nature of Palestine is part of our religion, and whoever takes his religion lightly is a loser, which it just always made me laugh. They called him a loser. It's just not the kind of thing you would expect to see in a political document, right? Anyways, quote, who will be adverse to the religion of Abraham, but he whose mind is infatuated, end quote. The day the PLO adopts Islam as its way of life, we will become its soldiers and fuel for its fire that will burn the enemies. Until such a day, and we pray for Allah that it will be soon, pray to Allah, excuse me, that it will be soon, the Islamic resistance movement stands, towards the PLO is that of the son towards his father, the brother towards his brother, and the relative to relative. Suffers his pain and supports him in confronting the enemies, wishing him to be wise and well guided. Quote, stand by your brother, for he who is brotherless is like the fighter who goes to battle without arms. One's cousin is the wing one flies with. Could the bird fly without wings? End quote. Article 28, their attitude towards Arab and Islamic countries. The Zionist invasion is a vicious invasion. It does not refrain from resorting to all methods, using all evil and contemptible ways to achieve its ends. It relies greatly in its infiltration and espionage operations on the secret organizations it gave rise to, such as the Freemasons, the Rotaries, and the Lions Clubs, and other sabotage groups. All these organizations, whether secret or open, work in the interest of Zionism and according to its instructions. They aim at undermining societies, destroying values, corrupting consciousness, deteriorating character, and annihilating Islam. It is behind the drug trade and alcoholism in all its kinds so as to facilitate its control and expansion. Again, absolutely everything is the Jews' fault, according to the charter here. Arab countries surrounding Israel are asked to open their borders before the fighters from among the Arab and Islamic nations so that they could consolidate their efforts with those of their Muslim brethren in Palestine. As for the other Arab and Islamic countries, they are asked to facilitate the movement of the fighters from and to it, and this is the least thing they could do. We should not forget to remind every Muslim that when the Jews conquered the Holy City in 1967, they stood on the threshold of the Aqsa Mosque and proclaimed that Muhammad is dead and his descendants are all women. Israel, Judaism, and Jews challenge Islam and the Muslim people. May the cowards never sleep. I want to say that again in case you think this is simply anti-Zionist. Israel, Judaism, and Jews, so the nation, the religion, and the ethnic group, all challenge Islam, according to this charter, and the Muslim people. And then it says, may the cowards never sleep. Again, this is a deeply anti-Semitic document. There's just no two ways about it. Its attitude towards nationalist and religious groupings, institutions, intellectuals, the Islamic and the Arab world. The Islamic resistance movement hopes that all these groupings will side with it in all spheres, would support it, adopt its stand, and solidify its activities and moves. Work towards rallying support for it so that the Islamic people will be a base and a stay for it, supplying it with strategic depth and I think is what that's supposed to say, all human material and informative spheres in time and place. This should be done through the convening of solidarity conferences, the issuing of explanatory bulletins, favorable articles and booklets, enlightening the masses regarding the Palestinian issue, clarifying what confronts it, and the conspiracies woven around it. They should mobilize the Islamic nations ideologically, educationally, and culturally so that these people would be equipped to perform their roles in the decisive battle of liberation, just as they did when they vanquished the Crusaders and the Tartars and saved human civilization. Indeed, it is not difficult for Allah. Quote, Allah hath written, verily I will prevail, and my apostles, for Allah is strong and mighty. End quote. Getting tired, but we are near done. And I'll save my videos and stuff like that maybe for a Friday special report instead of doing my Sabbath night open mic. Article 30. Writers, intellectuals, media people, orators, educators, and teachers, and all the various sectors in the Arab and Islamic world All of them are called upon to perform their role and to fulfill their duty. Because of the ferocity of the Zionist offensive and the Zionist influence in many countries exercised through financial and media control, as well as the consequences that all this lead to in the greater part of the world. I hope a lot of these conspiracy theories are sounding familiar to you, because the white supremacist version of anti-Semitism and the Islamic version of anti-Semitism are kissing cousins, and in fact, one likely derives from the other. I'll let you figure out which is which. Jihad is not confined to the carrying of arms and the confrontation of the enemy. The effective word, the good article, the useful book, support and solidarity, together with the presence of sincere purpose for the hoisting of Allah's banner higher and higher, all these are elements of jihad for Allah's sake. Quote, whosoever mobilizes a fighter for the sake of Allah is himself a fighter. Whosoever supports the relatives of a fighter, he himself is a fighter. End quote. Related by Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Abu Dawood, and al-Tirmidhi. The attitude of Hamas towards followers of other religions. The Islamic resistance movement is a humanistic movement. Article 31. The Islamic resistance movement is a humanistic movement. It takes care of human rights and is guided by Islamic tolerance when dealing with the followers of other religions. It does not antagonize any one of them except if it is antagonized by it or stands in its way to hamper its moves and waste its efforts. Of course, it's already said the exact opposite of that multiple times in regards to Jews, but also in regards to Christians and Orientalists, as they call them, which would be those from the East. But we continue. Maybe they have something of particular interest here. Under the wing of Islam, note, it is possible for the followers of the three religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, to coexist in peace and quiet with each other. Peace and quiet would not be possible except under the wing of Islam. Past and present history are the best witness to that. So in other words, if we have all the control, then we are okay with having mutual peace. But does it get more interesting? It is the duty of the followers of other religions to stop disputing the sovereignty of Islam in this region, because the day these followers should take over, there will be nothing but carnage, displacement, and terror. Every one of them is at a variance with his fellow religionists, not to speak about followers of other religionists. Past and present history are full examples to prove this fact. Quote, they will not fight against you in a body except in fenced towns or behind walls. Their strength in war is among themselves. Their strength in war among themselves is great. Thou thinkest them to be united, but their hearts are divided. This because they are people who do not understand. End quote. Islam confers upon everyone his legitimate rights. Islam prevents the incursion on other people's rights. The Zionist Nazi activities against our people will not last for long. Quote, for the state of injustice lasts but one day, while the state of justice lasts till doomsday. As to those who have not borne arms against you on account of religion, nor turned you out of your dwellings, Allah forbiddeth you not to deal kindly with them and to behave justly toward them, for Allah loves those who act justly. Now, it is at this point that I feel I should mention, not only have we seen this being clearly contradicted by their saying that they want to eradicate the Jews, and by their saying that all of this can only happen under the watchful eye of Islam, and by their saying that the Christians are really just crusaders, and by rallying against the Orientalists and all this other kind of stuff. But on top of that, I want to read to you guys a very interesting verse from the Quran. Surah 929 is what we're about to read here. This is one of the more popular verses of the Quran in the Western world, at least, because of its implications for jihad. But listen to this. Fight against those who do not believe in Allah or in the last day, and who do not consider unlawful what Allah and his messenger have made unlawful, and who do not adopt the religion of truth, i.e. Islam, from those who were given the scripture, i.e. the Jews and Christians. Fight until they give the jizya, that is a tax, willingly while they are humbled. The jizya, just so you guys are aware, is a tax required of non-Muslims, exempting them from military service and entitling them to the protection of the Islamic State. Concurrently, zakah is not to be taken from them, being an obligation only upon Muslims. So this is just this needs to be a context given to Article 31 here, because obviously Hamas would accept that. And this is on top of all the other caveats they themselves have made, including one in this very article where they say, under the wing of Islam, and only under the wing of Islam, it is possible for the followers of the three religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, to coexist in peace and quiet with each other. Of course, never mind the fact that Judaism needs to be destroyed until, and that's the only way the Judgment Day is going to come. And never mind the fact that the Christians who are going to be living here are going to have to be subjugated to attacks or otherwise fought. Never mind all that, because under the wing of Islam, it is possible for the followers of the three religions to coexist peacefully. You make sense of it. I certainly can't. The attempt to isolate the Palestinian people, Article 32. World Zionism, together with imperialistic powers, try through a studied plan and an intelligent strategy to remove one Arab state after another from the circle of struggle against Zionism in order to have it finally face the Palestinian people only. Egypt was, to a great extent, removed from the circle of this struggle through the treacherous Camp David Agreement. They are trying to draw other Arab countries into similar agreements and to bring them outside the circle of struggle. So you see agreements with the Jews and with the state of Israel that recognize the state of Israel as a sovereign entity cannot be allowed, according to Hamas. The Islamic resistance movement calls on Arab and Islamic nations to take up the line of serious and preserving action to prevent the success of this horrendous plan, to warn the people of the danger emanating from leaving the circle of struggle against Zionism. Today it is Palestine, tomorrow it will be one country or another. The Zionist plan is limitless. After Palestine, the Zionists aspire to expand from the Nile to the Euphrates. Now, I want you to note, in the coming section, we're going to see a reference to we'll just call it a popular work of fiction for now. You'll know what I'm saying here in a moment. When they will have digested the region they overtook, they will aspire to further expansion, and so on. Their plan is embodied in the protocols of the elders of Zion, and their present conduct is the best proof of what they are saying. Now, if you're not aware, which, excuse me, which I kind of doubt, but if you're not aware of what the protocols of the elders of Zion is, the protocols of the elders of Zion is a work which purports to be, hang on real quick, a work which purports to be a Jewish plot for global domination that was largely popularized in imperialist Russia around the early 1900s. And of course, it has played a massive role in this Jews conspiracy that the Nazis and that Hamas and that various other organizations have parroted. It was, in fact, explicitly distilled throughout Nazi Germany. It is widely known to be fabricated. The document claims that everything from the assassination of William McKinley to the assassination of Umberto I, who was king of Italy, to the great wars of the 1800s, such as the Napoleonic Wars and the Franco-Prussian War, to the revolution in France, the revolution, of course, in Russia had not yet happened, and so on and so forth. It claims all of these things are all part of a Zionist program to conquer the world, although, of course, they would not use the word Zionist, though they do use the phrase elders of Zion, right? This text is fraudulent. It has been demonstrated to be fraudulent, but nevertheless, it is something which is being repeated here in the Hamas text. And this just goes to show you, again, this is a deeply anti-Semitic document. And I don't mean I want to be clear here, too, because we live in the modern age where things like fascist and racist and anti-Semite are just so utterly abused that when you actually hear the term used legitimately, you kind of want to, tune it out and in one ear, out the other. It's like, oh, yeah, everything on the planet is racist and anti-Semitic. I'm sorry, right? But no, this is genuine anti-Semitism, right? Like when a group says that not supporting BLM is racist, that's stupid. At the same time, going after a black person, calling them the N-word, and making sure that their little girls are tied to a train track so that they can be run over simply for the crime of being black. Yeah, no, that actually is racist. And the fact that people are using the phrase racist to mean stuff that is in fact not racist doesn't change the fact that real racism exists. Likewise, while there is certainly a lot of genuinely crap usages of the phrase anti-Semitism, there is real anti-Semitism, and you're seeing it firsthand right here. Leaving the circle of struggle with Zionism is high treason, and cursed be he who does that. Quote, for whoso shall turn his back unto them on that day, unless he turneth aside to fight, or retreateth to another party of the faithful, shall draw on himself the indignation of Allah, and his abode shall be in hell. An ill journey shall it be thither. End quote. There was no way out except by concentrating all powers and energies to face this Nazi vicious Tartar invasion. The alternative is loss of one's country, the dispersion of citizens, the spread of vice on earth, and the destruction of religious values. Let every person know that he is responsible before Allah for, quote, the doer of the slightest good deed is rewarded in like, and the doer of the slightest evil deed is also rewarded in like. End quote. The Islamic resistance movement considers itself to be the spearhead of the circle of struggle with world Zionism, excuse me, and a step on the road. The movement adds its efforts to the efforts of all those who are active in the Palestinian arena. Arab and Islamic peoples should augment by further steps on their part. Islamic groupings all over the Arab world should also do the same, since all of these are the best equipped for the future role in the fight with warmongering Jews. Quote, and we have put enmity and hatred between them until the day of resurrection. So often as they shall kindle a fire of war, Allah shall extinguish it, and they shall set their minds to act corruptly in the earth, but Allah loveth not the corrupt doers, end quote. Only 4 left, my friends. I don't know how many of you are still here, but if you are still here, only 4 left. And the other things I was going to show you in the Quran and with the Hamas leaders actually explicitly saying this stuff for themselves, we'll do a part 2 special report on Friday. Article 33. The Islamic resistance movement being based on the common, coordinated, and independent conceptions of the laws of the universe, and flowing in the stream of destiny in confronting and fighting the enemies in defense of the Muslims and Islamic civilization and sacred sites, the first among which is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, urges the Arab and Islamic peoples, their governments, popular and official groupings to fear Allah where their view of the Islamic resistance movement and their dealings with it are concerned. They should back and support it as Allah wants them to, extending to it more and more funds till Allah's purpose is achieved, when ranks will close up, fighters join other fighters, and masses everywhere in the Islamic world will come forward in response to the call of duty while loudly proclaiming, Hail to Jihad. Their call will reach the heavens and will go on being resounded until liberation is achieved, the invaders vanquished, and Allah's victory comes about. Quote, and Allah will certainly assist him who shall be on his side, for Allah is strong and mighty, end quote. The testimony of history, across history in confronting the invaders, Article 34. Palestine is the navel, that is the belly button. Palestine is the navel of the globe and the crossroad of the continents. Since the dawn of history, it has been the target of expansionists, which, to be fair, that's actually true. One just needs to look at history and one will see that at various times, the Egyptians, the Hittites, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Jews again, the Jews a third time, the Jews a fourth time, obviously the Arabs, the Turks, the British. I mean, I'm sure I'm missing some. So many different people, the Crusaders, right? So many different people have had control over the land of Israel, and so many other people have tried to have control over the land of Israel. I mean, so far I've missed the Canaanites, the Girgashites, the Perizzites, the Amorites, the Hivites, etc. Right? Just so many. The prophet, again, when they say the prophet, they're talking about Muhammad. Allah bless him and grant him salvation, had himself pointed to this fact in the noble hadith in which he called on his honorable companion Ma'ad ben Jabal, saying, "O Ma'ath," I don't know why it's Ma'ad in the first and Ma'ath in this one, but anyways, Allah throw open before you where when I am gone, Syria from Al-Arish to the Euphrates, Now, notice they were just saying, oh, the Jews will want to conquer from Al Arish to Euphrates. And then they're saying, hey, may Allah help you to conquer from Al Arish to Euphrates. Slightly hypocritical, but what does Hamas care? Anyways, back to the quote. O Ma'ath, Allah throw open before you when I am gone, Syria from Al Arish to the Euphrates. Its men, women, and slaves will stay firmly there till the day of judgment. Whoever of you should choose one of the Syrian shores or the Holy Land, he will be in constant struggle till the day of judgment, end quote. Expansionists have more than once put their eye on Palestine, which they attacked with their armies to fulfill their designs on it. Thus, it was that the Crusaders came with their armies, bringing with them their creed and carrying their cross. They were able to defeat the Muslims for a while, but the Muslims were able to retrieve the land only when they stood under the wing of their religious banner, united their word, hallowed the name of Allah, and surged out fighting under the leadership of Salah ad-Din, al-Ayyubi, Saladin. They fought for almost 20 years, and at the end, the Crusaders were defeated, and Palestine was liberated. Quote, say unto those who believe not, ye shall be overcome and thrown together into hell, an unhappy couch it shall be, end quote. Oh, but remember, they can all live under peace under the banner of Islam. Nonsense. Anyways, this is the only way to liberate Palestine. There is no doubt about the testimony of history. It is one of the laws of the universe and one of the rules of existence. Nothing can overcome iron except iron. Their false feudal creed can only be defeated by the righteous Islamic creed. A creed could not be fought except by a creed, and in the last analysis, victory is for the just, for justice is certainly victorious. And again, I stress, this is an Islamic terrorist organization. They are jihadists at their core, more important than the liberation of Palestine, quote unquote. And I say quote unquote because it is Israel and it is already liberated. More important than that is jihad, global jihad. They've made that abundantly clear. I hope that you guys don't think that I am being unfair in saying that, because I've literally been reading this to you word for word. Giving commentary, yes, but reading this to you word for word. Quote, our word hath formerly been given unto our servants the apostles, that they should certainly be assisted against the infidels, and that our armies should surely be the conquerors, end quote. Article 35. The Islamic resistance movement views seriously the defeat. Oh my goodness. 1 second. The Islamic resistance movement views seriously the defeat of the Crusaders at the hands of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, again, Saladin, and the rescuing of Palestine from their hands, as well as the defeat of the Tartars at Ain Galat, breaking their power at the hands of Qataz and al-Dahr, Bivers, and saving the Islamic world from the Tatar onslaught, which aimed at the destruction of every meaning of human civilization. The movement draws lessons and examples from all this. The present Zionist onslaught has also been preceded by crusading raids from the west and other Tatar raids from the east. Just as the Muslims faced those raids and planned fighting and defeating them, they should be able to confront the Zionist invasion and defeat it. This is indeed no problem for the Almighty Allah, provided that the intentions are pure, the determination is true, and the Muslims have benefited from past experiences, rid themselves of the effects of ideological invasion, and followed the customs of their ancestors. Last article, the Islamic resistance movement is composed of soldiers. Article 36. While paving its way, the Islamic resistance movement emphasizes time and again to all of the sons of our people, to the Arab and Islamic nations, that it does not seek personal fame, material gain, or social prominence. It does not aim to compete against anyone from among our people or to take his place. Nothing of the sort at all. It will not act against any of the sons of Muslims or those who are peaceful towards it from among non-Muslims, be they here or anywhere else. It will only serve as support for all groupings and organizations operating against the Zionist enemy and its lackings. Bear in mind that it considers, for example, owning land that was formerly owned by Muslims to be an act of aggression against Muslims. So if, and it will never happen, but if they were to get control of Israel and form an independent Palestine, that would mean they would be coming for places like Spain and India and so on. The Islamic resistance movement adopts Islam as its way of life. Islam is its creed and religion. Whoever takes Islam as his way of life, be it an organization, a grouping, a country, or any other body, the Islamic resistance movement considers itself as their soldiers and nothing more. Again, friends, this is a jihadist movement. Do not be deceived by insane leftists who couldn't tell you what a Quran verse was if you pointed in neon signs and said, this is a Quran verse. Quote, we ask Allah to show us the right course, to make us an example to others, and to judge between us and our people with truth. O Lord, do thou judge between us and our nation with truth, for thou art the best judge, end quote. The last of our prayers will be praise to Allah, the master of the universe. And thus ends the Covenant of the Islamic Resistance Movement, 1988. Ladies and gentlemen, we have seen plainly from Hamas's own charter that they are bent on the destruction of Israel, that they are bent on the extermination of Jews, that they believe Christianity to be a Zionist plot, as well as every other religion for that matter, that they believe peace amongst religions is only possible under the banner of Islam, that they believe that death is good in service to Allah, that they believe that any land formerly owned by Muslims is waqif, that is consecrated land, and that it is violence against Muslims to take that land, meaning Israel, Spain, India, Dearborn, Michigan, and so much more we have read, not from Robert Spencer, not from David Wood, not from C.J. Cox, but from Hamas themselves. And when people want to claim absurdly that this is simply a liberation army, that this is simply freedom fighters, that if we could just go back to the pre-1967 borders, everything would be hunky-dory and we could sing Kumbaya around the fire. It is a lie. It is an insane, utterly detached from reality lie. And if you've watched this video, you now know for a fact that it is a lie. We will do a part 2 on this coming Friday instead of our usual Sabbath night open mic, where we will look through different Hamas leaders vocalizing this on video in the modern day, where we will go through Hamas leaders saying that they want Palestinians to die because it makes the Jews look bad. And we will even go over different places in the Hadith and Quran, though you saw those quoted here in Hamas's covenant. We'll go over them anyway, just to show you the basis of Hamas's teachings, which come directly from the Hadith and directly from the Quran. Ladies and gentlemen, I will leave you with this. We are living at a time where almost half of the population of our own country and half of the population of the country that is over there in Israel currently fighting off Hamas, and in Britain, and in Canada, and in France, and in Germany, and in Italy, and in Greece, and in Sweden, and in Iceland, and in Mexico, and in Finland, Czechoslovakia, I guess it's Czechia and Slovakia now, two different nations, right? Switzerland, and Portugal, and every other nation in the West you can think of. We are living at a time when the people who are going against us here want groups like this, groups like Hamas, to win out. They are actively seeking our destruction, whether that is because they hate the West or because they are simply useful idiots. And I think it may be a combination of both. And this is why I say so consistently, in the face of Armageddon, will you compromise? Because whether or not we are truly in the apocalypse or not, only time will tell. But we are in Armageddon-like circumstances, meaning the destruction of our society. And this goes not only for us, but for the Jews in Israel as well. And all of us need to say, in the face of Armageddon, I will not compromise. So shalom, friends. And with that, we will be ending this. See you tomorrow for another regular episode of The Watchdog.